The Temple of Space. We did not see this coming. When I played the World Quest, I was already expecting the story in itself wouldn't be that relevant to the main lore of the game. While that is true, we do have interesting takes on what the NPCs of this place said about their own civilization. I'll be very real with you all. A little bird who saw leaks told me that I'll be making hours and hours of content when the patch is up. And boy, he is right. Making content about the Temple of Space is not enough with just one video because we got a lot of fascinating lore bombs from this place alone. We learned about our siblings' fate, the point of view of Teyvat's history for various people throughout different timelines, and even a book called Varus Melancholy, which I never ever thought would be relevant in a lore video. There's a huge chance I'll be making multiple videos over the past few weeks, so be prepared because I'll be yapping a lot for your entertainment purposes. As always, don't forget to give this video a like, a comment so the channel can be noticed by the algorithm. My name is Glitchxcity and I make lore and commentary videos on this channel to keep you company. Typically, I would just recap the quest based on how the game shows us, but I don't find that a good format, so let's take it in a different route instead, where we'll do this by timeline accuracy and just straight to the point. So, the Temple of Space is a domain created by the ruler of space, ASMODAY. The premise of this place is to pick a very small segment of a specific historical age or an already lost civilization in order to preserve them forever, which in this case includes Arcadia, Solvindeknir, Langan, Delphi Phyto, into which we now know as Enkanomia, the civilization of King Deshret, the civilization of Greater Lord Rukkhadevata, Remuria, Otskanatlan, Hyperborea, and many more. The people who were brought here are then called the Iones. Ion is a Hellenistic deity that is associated with time, the orb or circle encompassing the universe and the zodiac. Time in this context refers to perpetual, or it's more accurate to say, eternity. Considering these people have essentially become immortal, there's no such thing as aging or death in this space, nor there's birth either. That said, it's quite the reason why they are called Ion in the first place, given the context behind its real-life references is tied to time. Yes, I know, A and Istarat stance. We'll get to them in a bit, I promise. The Temple of Space is an already lost name that is no longer used to refer to this place, and is now known as Segment Domain Tau. I tried my best to research what this even meant, and my research found that Tau is a Greek numerical that's value is 300. For perspective, this number is within the same family as Alpha, Omega, Delta, P, Sigma, etc. With that being said, it's possible there are more of these spaces within Celestius' domains. Yes, you hear that right. This is already within the domains of Celestia. You can only get to this temple using the Anima Archon statue that is within the already destroyed sanatorium, which the writing of the statue says, the gateway of Celestia. Just in case you don't believe that we are within Teyvat's endgame, well, that should already be telling. But, speaking of the sanatorium, historians say that the Temple of Space used to be a temple to worship Time herself. In this case, it refers to Istaroth, and is a part of Arcadia. This temple happens to be placed at the very same spot before the sanatorium was created thousands of years later, and was ascended to the sky when Nibelung returned to Teyvat. So in a way, the release of Dormanport is also the time when Arcadia gets released. Insane, I know. Just to tickle your brain a bit, there is another little island that is above the open-eyed past domain, which could hint at a possible area that might be related to Arcadia in the future. The Temple of Space has two watchers that watches over the place, that be Melantha, the Watcher of Melancholy, and Nihilita, the Watcher of Nothingness. Both of them are created by Asmodee and named using emotions that she cannot feel, and apparently are Asmodee's attempts to recreate angels. For a brief reminder, angels are the divine envoys created by the heavenly principles to guide humanity, but most of them are turned into Wasili after the first angel, Koitar, attempted to rebel against the heavenly principles. Not all angels turned into their wispy forms we see today, with Nicole and Sabai being the few that we managed to get the playable version of, Lord of the Night Yohwal Techuhtin in Natlan, and the deceased angels being Nabu Malikata and Sibila. The Watchers are apparently clumsy imitations of the Heavenly Principles' ideals, but we'll get to that in a bit. Melantha is the being that we faced in the world quest, while Nihilita is the open-eyed boss at the northmost of Dormanport. When ASMODAY went missing, Nihilita opened his eyes after finally learning the truth of Teyvat and defied his creator's rules. As a result, he left the Temple of Space and abandoned his duty as a Watcher. Melantha saw this as a betrayal and deemed Nihilita fell from grace. During this time, the Shades occasionally visit ASMODAY's domain, put some things that they find interesting to place within, and tweak some of the rules, allowing some minor changes with the way the temple works. This includes the freedom to move around more freely and even evolution. With the rule transgression, longing for ASMODAY, and seeking for approval, Melantha was driven mad and began his tyrannical ruling to return everything as it used to be. People at the Luyang Academy were turned into blood inks, people at the Mahafai Pulya Chamber are turned into pages because they created novels, people of the Desert Pavilion are turned into sand, while Maoki, who's said to have defied the laws of space, was then exiled to the Mortal Realm. Some of you might find it interesting how this man has two names, that being Maoki and Asher. If you find this familiar, that's because his form was used by the Torre to sabotage Tata Krasuna. When Melantha punished Maoki, it might be related to Maoki's relationship with the Torre specifically, but that's not relevant for this video's context. It might, however, be relevant to a future update, but we'll talk about that in another video. Regardless, the main conflict of this world quest is to stop Melantha from his tyranny. Nihilita wanted to free the Ionis from Melantha and began his wait within the secluded part of the Windrest Peak. The first person who he encountered was Romhilda, who eventually was sent to the Temple of Space. She grew to know the Ionis, but slowly grew devastated with Melantha's tyranny and offered her memories to confront Melantha. During her encounter with him, she failed to reach an agreement but promised that Zeitlin, her twin sister, would come back in her stead. She then soon leaves the Temple of Space, but at the cost of her memory to be completely erased. Before Romhilda completely lost her memory, she put a gravestone at the sanatorium to memorialize her past life, and then cut to the current story we have today. I'll make it brief because most of the important contexts are already explained. As time goes on, Nihilita finally encounters the Traveler and Paimon along with Zeitlin to confront Melantha. While they're at it, they also saved some of the Ionis. Since they freed these people, the main casts except Paimon were sent to the Apathic Interval, which this on its own I have a lot of things to say about. Then Zeitlin offered her memories to finally confront Melantha face to face. Some of the things mentioned in this part are more so related to the Zeitlin storyline, which I'll be real, pure cinema, the storytelling is great, but my laptop ruined the immersion because I got lagged a lot, and this ugly cutscene makes me want to cry on the spot. Anyways, we learn about Nihilita's rebellion and how his eyes are opened. We also learn that ASMODAY chose her over Melantha, which this gender pronoun changes depending on the choice of traveler you chose. So we can safely assume that this person Melantha refers to is our twin, and what do you know? My theory about her master being our twin is correct all along. At first, Melantha thought it was a punishment for transgression, but it seems ASMODAY's actions have a much deeper meaning. One thing that kept on being mentioned here is the heretical myth that light and darkness birthed the primordial human, which apparently it seems is one of the main reasons why ASMODAY did what she did. I'll talk about this later because this ties to another insane theory I talked about in my last video. After defeating Melantha, we finally learned the truth about this place. The moment ASMODAY left the Temple of Space, it's also the moment where everyone is freed from the rules that bind them. This meant that even Melantha is free from the rules that bind him. However, Melantha chose to not do this because of his longing for his creator, ASMODAY. He even wished to stay by her side. When ASMODAY left, he did everything he could to perceive praise and even bring ASMODAY back to the temple, but she never did. This guy is a simp, is all I can say. However, I also find this to be interesting because the moment ASMODAY left, everyone is free to do whatever they want. Like Zeitlin said, if Melantha showed some act of rebellion, then ASMODAY might have taken him with her, which, yeah, this is also confirmation that ASMODAY isn't it rebelling. Somehow, I can't help but find her act of rebellion to be very interesting. Let alone, this might even be linked to why the Abyss is so important in the first place. Melantha is just jealous of everyone and how everything can just change, evolve, and be free. He is jealous of Nihilita's freedom and change, which, yeah, if you compare those two, Nihilita might have fallen from grace, but he is free to do whatever he wants. Since Melantha is still a stickler to the rules, he eventually self-destructs himself because his actions are ironically against the rules. He was never allowed to banish Maoki nor sever the past within the corridor of nothingness. Melantha is defeated, everyone returns to the surface, Zeitlin forgets all of her memories, and the quest finally ends. But it's worth noting that ASMODAY watched the entire thing happen. Damn, it's been a while since I made a longer recap. However, I believe I've recapped the whole thing altogether, which actually satisfies me since this whole thing is a bit convoluted. I have to rewatch my recording to make the best sense out of the lore, and I think I deserve a pat in the back. I have some theories in mind, so let's do this. But before we continue, do note that I am working on these videos all by myself. Being a solo player is quite difficult, let alone being the one working with the scripts and all of these drawing assets in a potato laptop. My target by the end of this month is to reach 20,000 subscribers, so helping me by liking and subscribing will not only help this channel, but also boost my mood knowing that I did a very good job. With that said, let's continue with our first theory. When I watched Kat's video, the words that Ace said were absolutely correct.
Only through eternity are you closest to the heavenly principles.
We learned from Alice that the heavenly principles modified Teyvat as is in order to keep everything in one single timeline. Everything that deviates from it is subject to be removed, which is why the heavenly principles tries really hard to not let the Abyss intervene with Teyvat's affairs. The Abyss, in essence, is fates that will never come to pass, or basically the unchosen fate. The wording and definition can be really weird, so I highly recommend you to watch my last video talking about the last Mondstadt event in greater detail. The reason everything that exists in the Temple of Space is there is to preserve a small segment of the history. We see plenty of things that being stored here, which includes the Arcadian treasure to even a poem talking about Nabu Malikata. Melantha states that the Ionis reject the sacred stillness despite being ascended to heaven and cling to the corruption of the mortal world. Now this is important because it goes the exact opposite of what ASMODAY is doing right now, which is believed to actively rebel against the heavenly principles. Personally, I find her actions to be influenced by our sibling because she was eventually freed. Heck, she even was chosen by ASMODAY to rebel together. With that being said, it's very likely that out of the four, ASMODAY was the most loyal shade. If we look at the shades together, it doesn't seem that ASMODAY wanted to help humanity in the first place, but rather she wanted to preserve them like a museum exhibit. Istaroth helped the people of Delphi Phyto, Renova helped the people of Natlan, and Nibirius showed signs of aiding Egeria in creating the humanoid Oceanids. ASMODAY's case is different because while she elevated the Arcadian temple into the main building of the Temple of Space, she never did that for the sake of helping humanity either. Historia said to himself, ASMODAY is incapable of feeling pity towards humans, and the reason she named her creations as nothingness and melancholy because they are the emotions that she can't feel the most. With how the Temple of Space works, everything behaves very differently. Time doesn't flow normally, death does not exist, and newborn life is not possible. It's as if everything really is still and follows the ideals of what the heavenly principles wanted. It's as if this is the way of the heavenly principles, which what makes Ace say to be true. When one tries to evolve, ASMODAY would personally correct them, literally what A also did during the Sakoku decree. It wouldn't be surprising the reason ASMODAY captured our sibling was to at first follow the will of the heavenly principles, but as time goes, perhaps she too became convinced and realized that her ideals are flawed to begin with. Either that or she indeed intended to use the sibling from the start. Personally, I kinda want to believe the latter. It's been quite a common theory that ASMODAY wanted to rebel in the first place, and Nihilita's boss drop kinda say that to be the case. Perhaps this is because their own creator failed to grasp the divine design of the winged one above and can only clumsily imitate the shadow cast by that ideal. In this case, both ASMODAY and A are not that far off, don't you think? Both of them created the eternity that seems to be aligned with the heavenly principles, but it doesn't seem that eternity is the right kind of eternity either. Based on the lore so far, all the way from the Before Sun and Moon to Narcissan Court's questline to the three moon goddesses, it seems the way the heavenly principles want their eternity to last is by making Teyvat into a constant loop. Everything is within a single line, and once the timeline reaches its end, it will safely reset to where it once started. But unlike A, where she wished to remain in that constant stillness, it seems ASMODAY's case is different. Not helping with Nihilita's boss drop description, it's possible that ASMODAY wanted to be like her creator, the heavenly principles, but eventually found that sort of ideal is just too difficult to understand. Instead of clinging to those ideals, she instead let go of them and tried to embrace freedom, which also affected the Ionis and her own creations. In a way, everything about ASMODAY is quite ironic. According to Historia, the Watchers were named, well, the Watchers because they were awakened and enlightened, but were then closed because ASMODAY programmed them to do just that. But the moment they opened their eyes, they also defy her will. Interesting, isn't it? It's just ironic. One thing that I find very peculiar about this story is how they mention the myth of the primordial human, or in other words, the first human. The game never really mentioned this either, and there really isn't much reason to say, because the lore so far implies humans were created at the same time by Nabirius, or in Kukulkan's words, thrown by the heavenly principles to Teyvat. This part of the lore is indeed new, and according to both Historia and Melantha, the first human was created when the God of Light created a body in its own likeness, only for it to be stolen by the King of Darkness. Light and darkness met, thus creating the primordial human. This myth is said to be a heresy, and the angels would punish those who believe this parable. However, knowing how this might even be related to why ASMODAY would rebel in the first place, pretty much tells me that this might have a lot of truth in them. This goes back to a wing that no one talks about enough, Wings of the Silent Moon. Not gonna lie, I'm still baffled at that I'm the only one talking about this along with another content creator named Hina Impact. Regardless, you can watch my video if you want to learn more about this Wings lore. The basic premise is not necessarily about the Snow King, who right now is what I would theorize to be Belitzar, or his real name as Monomach, but rather his enemy. You see, the story of the Wing ends with Monomach finding his true enemy at the deepest part of the Irminsul, which is apparently abyssal in nature. There are two endings of this Wing. The first is that the enemy bore Monomach's face, while the others say that Monomach is forever trapped in that domain. Either way, both of the endings are just aligned with the myth where the King of Darkness consumes the God of Light, who has the ability to create a body in its own likeness. The story in itself is very likely referring to a hymn that is in the Hymns of the Far North, talking about the third descender, Monomach, and potentially the Tsaritsa, or known as Anastasia. Since this story is quite a plot point of this world quest, it's possible that it's actually referring to the heavenly principles. Remember, the descenders are beings that are not affected by the Irminsul. They have the will to rival Teyvat's fate, and the heavenly principles fit that world perfectly. It might be possible that despite being the God of Light himself, he eventually consumes the Abyss to power himself up, because that's apparently what is being portrayed in the Wings of the Silent Moon. If they also use the Abyss even during their arrival, then the first human created by Nabirius or thrown by the heavenly principles was a byproduct of their own creation. Now comes to the twins. The interesting part about this story is how the King of Darkness consumes the God of Light, creating a human in the process. Our twin is the princess of the Abyss Order and has consumed a lot of abyssal energy. Us, on the other hand, consumes a lot of elemental energy and has always been using light in order to fight enemies. If ASMODAY is working with our twin, then she is obliged to also help Lumine in finding a new space for the Atlas of the New World. This would automatically make Lumine a new ruler of Khaenri'ah, and if one day Aether also has to confront Lumine again, then it would definitely end up in a battle which could result in either of them as a new god of the next samsara to happen. Damn, I just realized that ASMODAY might be the ultimate reason why the samsaras happen in the first place, because she contains the descenders into a certain space. Of course, that's just a very stupid copium and frankly impossible since she is a creation of a descender. But imagine if that's the case though. There has been a theory that the Shades don't like the heavenly principles and has been trying to actively replace them. I think this theory was made by Minsliv in one of her videos, and looking at how the Shades show some rebellion or disobedience, that might have been the case in the first place. Now this comes to another huge topic I want to talk about in this video. Paimon. Another day, another Paimon expose theory. I think a lot of you know the basis of this, that being her not getting dragged into the apathic interval. For a brief reminder, apathic interval is a space within the Temple of Space and serves as a punishment for those who break the rules. It's basically a prison really, and the way it is designed is basically just that. They don't really explain in great detail why this exists because as far as I know, some of the Ionis were sent here the moment they were brought by ASMODAY or the Watchers to the Temple of Space. In order to escape, the Ionis were demanded to clear their minds and desires, maintaining the state of emptiness. In a way, you have to go through everything that is dear to you and be apathetic, literally stated in its name. Man, Mystic Flower Cookie would really love this place. Return to nothing. But seriously, that in itself is the reason why people won't receive a vision after they went through the apathic interval, but we'll talk about that in another video. However, judging from what Historia said, it seems the coffins are newly added to the space. These coffins are called Mahranasati coffins, which the name itself takes inspiration from a Buddhist meditation to ponder about death. The goal of this meditation is to help you from the fear of death and live as a better person. The concept more or less goes the same here, but it doesn't seem these coffins are necessary either. Historia said that one of the Shades brought these coffins into the apathic interval, and considering the name itself literally meant death, it's good to assume that Renova brought these coffins here. So we know what these coffins are and the reason for apathic interval to exist, but it somehow doesn't drag Paimon in. The game actually explains to us immediately that Paimon doesn't think much, but if you really think about this carefully, even this reasoning makes no sense at all because Paimon cares for the Traveler. He is Paimon's whole life. We saw how much she loves the Traveler, and we even saw her getting a mental breakdown when the Traveler was captured by the Torre. If anything, compared to Historia, she should be the one to be captured in the first place because she has something that clings to her mind. The apathic interval is literally designed for you to let go of everything you love, and Paimon doesn't get dragged in? That's suspicious. That's weird. So what is she? There are two major theories that I come up with. So let's start with one by one. Now we know that Paimon is not ASMODAY because when her portal appeared at the end of the quest, Paimon was there. That being said, I think this is quite a huge theory within the community lately, especially with how there's strangely Paimon-esque goblets all around the Temple of Space. The color palette is exactly the same, the design reminiscent of Paimon, it all ties to her. We learn in this game that there's this thing called tri-factor excision, where one can split their soul into 3 deadly selves. A similar thing also exists in Sumeru called Shattering Atmagraha. Outside of these two, we see Rene the Petrichor did it to himself, calling it as renunciation of ego. Tabai, Rene, Chi-Chi, and Andreas are such beings that experienced this before, with Tabai was held by Istaroth due to how complicated her soul is, while Andreas is capable of splitting his soul into many forms. Farkas' expedition is solely to gather all of these souls specifically, hence why his story quest happened. Chi-Chi's case is unique because her current form is one of her surviving selves while the other two are already ceased to exist. With that in mind, it's very possible that ASMODAY does the same thing to herself. In fact, Melantha and Nihilita are created based on emotions that she couldn't deal with the most, so it's not impossible to think that Paimon might be one of them as well. It could also make sense since this makes Paimon immune to the rules in the first place, because she is a segment of ASMODAY that was thrown away. I actually saw a Facebook post not too long ago talking about this, and I agree with a lot of their points. One that stood out to me is her being Asmodee's empathy, something that is what Paimon actually is. Unlike other shades, Asmodee has none of that. And it's possible that Paimon is the very segment that represents just that. It's not helping that Paimon was fished out of the sea, which, if we know the Dark Sea lore, is a place of exile for death gods or entities that are not acknowledged by Celestia. I think this theory in itself further supports the theory that Paimon is a part of ASMODAY, because either way, she is hinted to be strongly connected to her. However, I want to propose another theory which still links to one of my infamous theories where Paimon is the god of the game instead of being the heavenly principles. You did not hear that wrong, I said what I said. She is the Game Master. I'll elaborate this in a bit, I promise. You see, when I saw Dexter, I didn't expect him to actually be a watcher. I first thought of him being just a normal pet or Nihilita's helper, but we are revealed by Historia that he is in his juvenile form. This means that he will eventually grow bigger to have Nihilita and Melanda's form, but when that will happen is something that we have no idea on. The point is that Dexter was likely created by Nihilita, as there's never been stated that ASMODAY created him. This could mean that Nihilita might perform a trifactor incision on himself, or literally created him by himself using how ASMODAY created him. So, here's my proposal. Paimon is a nascent form of the ruler of reason. I get that people find this theory to be stupid, and I do so too. So, to one of my commenters named PeerNell13, I saw your comment. I saw that theory, and the fact that theory makes a lot of sense now makes me regret not thinking too much about it in the first place. Yes, I read every single comment you all left me for future video ideas, so pardon me if I don't reply, but just know I read every single one of them. Regardless, I agree that the heavenly principles are very unlikely to hold the power of reason, or Paimon is the heavenly principles. If anything, it makes the statements in every single of their introduction in God's Limits even weirder, because if reason is the heavenly principles, why are they obeying them in the first place? Why are they upholding the rules that the heavenly principles gave them? This evidence holds more merit within ASMODAY because all she cared about is upholding the rules that the heavenly principles gave them. Unless something bigger is at play. You see, Paimon's existence is always an enigma. Believe it or not, everything in this game has always been centered around Paimon even when we don't realize it. If anything, out of all Hoyoverse's mascots, Paimon is the strongest one because not only she is in every single part of Genshin Impact's marketing, but her logo is everywhere in the game, including within the Three Moon Goddesses. It's as if she is there to not only guide, but to make us the players make the best reasoning out of everything within the world she is in. I know a lot of you might have a counter argument to this, and I believe one of them is that she is affected by the Ermin Soul. I agree, she is affected by the Ermin Soul, therefore it's not logical to think that she is the AI or the heavenly principles. But I think you missed out a very crucial part that is addressed in this game. You see, even though time doesn't flow normally within the Temple of Space, it is still affected by the Ermin Soul. Lmao is one of the Ionis who came from Sumeru, and she was abducted during the era of Rukkhadevata's reign before she helped King Deshret in cleansing the Forbidden Knowledge. However, once you finish Sumeru's Archon quest, she will forget Rukkhadevata's name and refer to Nahida instead, which proves that even the Shades are affected by the Ermin Soul. What I'm trying to say is, if Paimon is affected, this rules out her being the heavenly principles. Remember, the Senders are not affected by Teyvat's Ermin Soul tampering, but if she is a shade of reason, this makes everything about her a lot of sense now. Everything about her has very little reason to make sense of, but at the same time, it's also quite intentional. In the original Orskoeshian mythology, Paimon is a demon king that teaches art, science, and uncover secrets of knowledge. It's literally linked to the meaning of reason, where it is the cognitive ability to think and understand the sense of this world. However, this theory needs its own video because I fell into so many rabbit holes that I need an essay just to make the best sense out of this theory. Just know this. Dexter was made by Nihilita as a juvenile watcher and will soon grow into an actual watcher in the future. The Ionist taught him what is right and wrong, and he will be a different kind of watcher in the future. This goes the same with Paimon, because if she is a juvenile shade of reason, then she was made by using a part of ASMODAY and was thrown into the sea, having the travel to be at her side and become the very reason why she existed in the first place. The moment she becomes a shade, that's where she'll become the shade of reason and help the traveler to defeat the heavenly principles. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Jana!